My name is Cindy Hackett. I'm a member of the Board of Trustees of the Tahoma Unitarian Universalist congregation, my third Unitarian Universalist congregation in my history with Unitarian Universalism. As we begin our gathering, I want to respectfully acknowledge that I speak to you today from occupied Puyallup ancestral land. And I think we all are probably listening today from Indigenous land. I pay respect to elders past and present, and I extend that respect to their descendants and all Indigenous people who are still loving, living, and working on that land today. We welcome all who are joining us with a longing for community, the hope for peace, and who are seeking justice. We are a diverse congregation, and we encourage each who comes through our doors to find their own truth or belief. We invite all to join us in a search for meaning and for community, guided by reason, respect for each other, and by love. The wonderful thing about walking in through the Zoom door is that this gives us an opportunity to welcome guests from outside our traditional geographic area. And it also lets people who maybe aren't feeling very well and wouldn't come through our physical doors, but can join us through Zoom. So we give a special welcome now to friends, to new friends, and our returning friends who are visiting from near and far away. I invite you to follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Links to the video version of this service will be posted there this week, as well as on our website. And I find personally that sometimes during the week when I need kind of to reground myself, listening to even a portion of that service helps me do that. And sometimes then I really sing out loud with those hymns because, boy, it's settling and energizing all at the same time. You can find all of our program announcements this week in our e-news. So after service today at 12 noon, join members of our Widening the Circle implementation team to continue the discussion you'll hear in our worship service today about what it would mean to put a Black Lives Matter banner on our church building. Just a reminder, Kids Chapel will be on pause today, but will resume next week on May 23rd. This week, Monday at 7 p.m., join the Infinite Cups for an exploration of pagan tools and altars. In a very special announcement, we are delighted to share that Arian Babcock, our former ministerial intern, was granted a Master's of Divinity degree from Star King School for the Ministry this week. Arian is currently working as a learning fellow with the Church of the Larger Fellowship, offering pastoral care to their members. And she will see the Ministerial Fellowship Committee in September as a final step in becoming a UU minister, which has many, many steps. Another of our former ministerial interns, Matt Aspen, will be ordained on Saturday, June 12th. And you can find information and the invitation in our e-news. Joe Rettenmeyer, who will be working with us again during Reverend Linda's sabbatical, will also be ordained in the same ordination service. Next Sunday, May 23rd, following worship service at noon, the sabbatical committee will host a discussion about Reverend Linda's upcoming sabbatical this summer through October and about plans during her sabbatical. For example, during the summer months this year, we'll be joining for online worship services with the Saltwater UU Church in Des Moines and the North Lake UU Church in Kirkland, with worship leadership participation from each congregation. This should be a wonderful experiment for us in shared worship. Also see our e-news this week for a safe parking update and for my blog post, Delicious Ambiguity, where we talk a little bit about where we are right now and considering reopening for worship services. That one of our primary considerations absolutely is to be inclusive, including when we can safely welcome our children to return to the building with adults. And I just would like to add that the board welcomes any and all comments and concerns about when we're going to resume worshiping together in person. We do have a board address, which is board@TahomaUU.com, I think. Better check that out through the e-news or through the website. We're also looking at ways to gather smaller groups and to find opportunities to be face-to-face, likely with masks, and we'll update you when we have more information on those opportunities. Links again for all of our programs can be found in the weekly e-news or via the events on our church calendar. We want to thank you for your ongoing financial support to our congregation that makes all of this possible. These programs, our staff who create and facilitate the programs, and the connections that we make through our congregation. We know it's difficult, and we are so appreciative for your stewardship. And now, let us prepare to gather in worship.
Good morning, everyone. As Cindy mentioned, our service today comes from your implementation committee for Widening the Circle. Today's service is an invitation to the conversation about adding a Black Lives Matter banner to our building. We'll have a chance to hear the perspectives from different members of this committee, Stacy and Maria and Kat Bilnowski, who have put together this service to invite you into the conversation. Our opening words today come from Michael Eric Dyson's Tears We Cannot Stop, a sermon to white America. He uses the word beloved in reference to the white ears he is speaking to and for, and offers a particularly generous coaxing of whiteness to empathize with Blackness. Beloved, to be white is to know that you have at your own hand, or by extension, through institutionalized means, the power to take Black life with impunity. It's the power of life and death that gives whiteness its force, its imperative. White life is worth more than Black life. This is why the cry, Black Lives Matter, angers you so greatly, why it is utterly offensive and effortlessly revolutionary. It takes aim at white innocence and insists on uncovering the lie of its neutrality, its naturalness, its normalcy, its normativity. The most radical action a white person can take is to acknowledge this denied privilege, to say, yes, you're right. In our institutional structures and in deep psychological structures, our underlying assumption is that our lives are worth more than yours. But that is a tough thing for most of you to do. He continues, beloved, all of what I have said should lead you to empathy. It sounds simple, but its benefits are profound. Whiteness must shed its posture of competence, its will to omniscience, its belief in its goodness and purity, and then walk a mile or two in the boots of Blackness. The siege of hate will not end until white folk imagine themselves as black folk, vulnerable despite our virtues. If enough of you, one by one, exercises your civic imagination and puts yourself in the shoes of your black brothers and sisters, you might develop a democratic impatience for injustice, for the cruel disregard of black life, for the careless indifference to our plight. Now is the time that you can ready your at-home chalice and join me in the unison reading that you can find in your chat as Bob lights our chalice in our sanctuary. We light this chalice in deep respect for the mystery and holiness of life, in honor and gratitude for those who have gone before, with love and compassion for those who dwell among us, and with hope and faith for the generations to come. Hi, I'm Janina. I'm doing the Time for All Ages today. I have a son, maybe that some of you know. His name's Julian. He's 4. As a young child, the lessons that we teach Julian are pretty simple right now. One of the ways we try to teach Julian empathy, which for kids is kind of the idea of using your imagination to put yourself in someone else's shoes and imagine what life would be like as someone else, is by seeing and appreciating differences. People are all so different and all deserve to have the same gifts and beauty in life. As a boy who has white skin, Julian will have a lot of things made pretty easy for him by a lot of people in this world. Things that will be easier not because he earned it or he deserves it, but because of the long history of this country treating people differently whose skin doesn't look like Julian's. As his mother, I've been thinking about helping him learn empathy as he gets older and starts asking more questions about people with black or brown skin and starts to notice for himself some of the different treatment that some of these children may experience. To do this, I've started writing Julian a letter. In my letter to Julian, we've also started an email address for him, so I'll probably email it to him before I handwrite this out. But in my letter to Julian, I've taken all of these stories that I've read and been told over my life that have helped me use my imagination to close my eyes and tried to understand what my black and brown friends experience in life that might be different, that is different than from what I've experienced. I want to read some of that letter to you today. And if you have skin like Julian's, maybe you can close your eyes and pretend what it would be like if you got this letter. Dear Julian, we've coached you to say Black Lives Matter since you were 3 years old. We've been telling you and reading to you stories about other people's experiences and other places in this world since you were born. We read books every day to help paint a picture of the world that is filled to the brim with colorful people and places and ideas. We also talk a lot about feelings in this family. Stories and feelings, as far as I've been able to tell in this life, are what makes our imagination go. It fuels our imagination into wondering what could be and what is and what we wish to see in the world. Stories, feelings, and vibrant imaginations are a really great recipe for something called empathy. See, honey, to say Black Lives Matter requires you to have the ability to imagine what life is like for people whose skin is different colors than yours or mine. To pretend that every experience you have in your life might be completely different for someone else. As your mom, I think about it all the time, how even having a son for a Black mother is and will be wildly different than my own experience of having a son. I think about how other Black moms might not have made it through having their babies because of the way the doctor chose to treat them. I think about that Black baby losing his mother even before getting to hug her for the first time because of the history in this country and stories that have been told about the different levels of care in hospitals of Black and brown people. I think about the assumptions, which is a fancy word for probably wrong guess, people make about your Black and brown friends who are close in age to you, just being kids. I think about those probably wrong guesses that many white people, including policemen, make about Black and brown children and people that cause them to make dangerous and wrong decisions, like pulling out their guns when they didn't have to. See, Julian, for 400 years, since people who looked like you and me made the terrible and wrong decision to enslave people who had Black and brown skin, Black and brown people have been telling stories for 400 years about how since this time, they have not been treated with kindness and respect. That even though we no longer enslave people the same way, just look at how many Black mothers, fathers, and children are in our jails today. Black and brown people still have not experienced life the same way that you and I believe everyone should experience life. With a comfortable home, stable job, car to move around from place to place in, and the ability to experience the world without fear of losing your life. Honey, we believe Black Lives Matter because we have really good imaginations. We believe Black Lives Matter because we can close our eyes and imagine how unfair it is that for 400 years, Black and brown people have been asking to be listened to and treated fairly. And for 400 years, hardly anyone listens. We come to church at TUUC on Sundays because we believe we are making friends with other people who also have this ability to empathize, the ability to see past their own experiences by using their imagination and listening to those 400 years of Black stories. We believe we are making friends and building a community with other people who will also shout from the rooftops that Black Lives Matter, because they are also a group of people who want to take action. Julian, I can almost hear you asking me later when you're older, does my life matter, Mama? Does your life matter, Mama? Doesn't everyone's life matter, Mama? The answer is yes. Your Black and brown friends also believe your life matters too. Oh my God, sorry. But let's put on our extra special listening ears and remember that for over 400 years, people's lives who look like us have been telling the story of being treated unfairly. And it's our job to listen, reach out, take action, and help our neighbor who has been asking for help for 400 years. Love, Mama. That ends our time for all ages. I will speak the words now that we typically sing to our children as they depart when we're meeting together. We hold you in our love as you go, as you go. May your heart be at peace as you go. To nurture the spark of your precious life, we hold you in our love as you go. Now is the time where we offer our financial gifts to the work of this congregation. Thank you for your consideration to support our church during this unprecedented time apart. You may follow the link on this slide or click the link in the chat or text your donation to contribute your support for our church members and staff working tirelessly to keep our congregation connected in new and dynamic ways. Every little bit helps, and while we are apart, our gifts are stronger together. Okay, now please join me as we dedicate that offering in the unison reading. We dedicate ourselves and our offerings to the work of this congregation, weaving a tapestry of love we call community, both within and beyond these walls.
My name is Stacy Saltoff. I've been a member of Tahoma for a few years now, a member of Infinite Cups and the SJC, the Social Justice Committee. And recently I joined the team at TUUC implementing recommendations from the UUA's report on institutional racism, Widening the Circle. I'd like to take a few minutes to share with you some of my family story and why it's so important to me to work on building an inclusive, beloved community, where the inherent worth and dignity of everyone is valued and respected, not just in words, but in our deeds. 10 years ago, my sister got married. Here's a picture from that day. My father's not in this picture. He wasn't there. He took a trip to the beach instead, unable to bear to watch his beloved daughter marry a Black man. In the 4 years they'd been dating, he could only be convinced to meet my brother-in-law once. My father's objections to my brother-in-law's race was a source of conflict in our home for years. Family get-togethers, holidays, always a source of tension and stress. When my parents repainted their living room and took down all the family photos, not one went back up. My father refused to display any photos of my sister, and my mother would not cut my sister out. My mother nearly left him, but she discovered she was sick and felt she needed him to take care of her. I spent years arguing with my father, naively, that his fears about the racism my sister and her future children might experience was unfounded. I saw interracial families all around me, on TV and film and in my neighborhood. Miscegenation laws had been struck down for decades. We had a Black president. Our society was past all that, right? Mom started hospice care the day after that photo was taken. And it wasn't until after she died that my father was able to find the capacity for self-reflection and forgiveness to work through his feelings and internalized biases and repair his relationship with my sister and her husband. He apologized for his behavior over the years, and he made sincere efforts to make amends for the harm he had done. He met my sister's in-laws and went online to, in his words, make Black friends so that he could better understand his son-in-law's family. In the process, he met his now wife. The man who refused to attend my sister's wedding has been happily married for 3 years to a Black woman. He has 5 beautiful grandchildren, my brother's 3 white children, and my sister's 2 interracial kids. I am so incredibly grateful for the racial healing that has occurred in my family, though that work is not done. And I want that healing for our community, our society as a whole. My father, while deeply wrong for so many years on the subject of race and racism, was also right, as the turn of our public discourse the last several years and the proliferation of Black Lives Matter protests last summer so clearly demonstrate. As I heard someone put it recently, diverse Cheerios commercials does not mean that racism is over. There are so many racial wounds that need healing in our country, systemic injustices and racist wrongs that have yet to be righted. To repair the relationships that have been damaged by centuries of harm, we have to see the impact of the systems we have built that reverberate through the generations to the present day. We don't bear the guilt of our ancestors' actions, but we do bear responsibility to undo the harm being done in the present by unequal systems of justice and economic opportunity. And we have to change those systems substantively in the present and for the future. I believe that this change is not only necessary, but possible. If my father, who spent years judging a man of good character as unworthy based on the color of his skin, if he can sincerely and deeply do the work, not to not see race, but to see and not judge, is there not hope for our society, our country, our community? I want our congregation to fly a Black Lives Matter banner, not as a statement of the work we have done, but as a public commitment to the work we have to do. It's hard work, but if we truly believe in the inherent worth and dignity of every human life, how can we turn a blind eye and ignore how Black lives are not treated with dignity in our country? How our actions and policies demonstrate over and over again that they don't matter. Black lives do matter, not more than others, too. Black lives matter too. And I will say it over and over until we as a society act as if they do. I invite my beloved Tahoma community to join me in that commitment.
Thank you so much, Stacy. Our reading today is from Equality in a Sea of Inequality by Peggy Clark. When this country was founded, the aspiration was high. The men who imagined it dreamed big, casting a vision of a world where all men were created equal, where rights were endowed by our Creator, transcending culture and the expectations of the day, where life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness would be allowed and enjoyed without infringement. It was a radical and new vision, born from Enlightenment optimism, inspired by scientific discovery. It was an intoxicating vision, as bold as the Protestant Reformation that swept all of Europe. And they had the hubris to believe that they could make it happen. They staked their claim in the Declaration of Independence and institutionalized it in the Constitution. They elected their first president, and when he stepped down, relinquishing power to return to the role of citizen, those founders believed they lived to see their vision realized. A new president ran for office, and the republic was up and running. It was done, a new world order. Those men weren't distracted by the genocide they inspired, for the enslavement of other people they required for this nation to be born. They declared equality while swimming in a sea of inequality. When they declared all men were created equal, they meant white, Protestant men. They didn't mean women. They didn't include Catholics, Jews, or people who didn't own land. They were so proud of their inclusivity, so inspired by their own cutting-edge philosophy, that they had no idea how narrow it was, how constrictive, how small a vision. The men who wrote those words were calling into being a more perfect union. They were establishing justice, ensuring domestic tranquility, securing the blessings of liberty. They believed that they and the men of their generation would will this new nation into being. They would establish the structures required for such a grand vision. They would test it, and then it would be done. They didn't realize it would require many more people, many different voices. They didn't know how many generations would have to be part of the creation of that dream, how long it would take before the nation they imagined would be made manifest. The soul of America has yet to be born.
For those who don't know me, my name is Maria Figueroa. My purpose today is to share with you my perspective on Black Lives Matter. I can never speak to what it's like to be a Black person or what it's like to grow up as a Black person in this country. But I'm going to start by sharing some of my experience as a second-generation American. My earliest memories of the concept of the United States of America was of reverence. My mother, who was born in Mexico City, studied hard for her citizenship test. She made sure to know how blessed we were to live in this country. Our family took the history of the founding of this country very seriously. We learned language about freedom and liberty, and phrases like, with justice and equality for all in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. But even as a child, I understood that this was an ideal worth striving for, but not a reality. I mean, it was obvious not everyone was treated the same. My mother complained of people assuming she was stupid because of her accent. Race made a difference. Being lighter in skin was considered better. Us 6 children ranged across a wide spectrum on that front. I noticed early on that my darker skinned siblings were taunted and called names much more than the lighter skinned ones. In my family, we noted the prejudice towards us indignantly. But at the same time, we also practiced our own subtle, unacknowledged prejudice directed at other groups, including Black people. But back to that ideal. When I first learned of the Declaration of Independence, my first feelings of outrage were about the phrase men. I was assured by the powers that be that the word men included women. It was later that I learned, no, it did not, for 140 years. Learning about the history of slavery was another shock. I discovered that Black enslaved people were obviously not included either. In fact, it was so obvious that Black people were not part of all men that there was no explicit statement excluding them or the indigenous people that already lived on the land. As I grew older and as an adult, I learned other history. The Chinese Exclusion Act from 1882 to 1943, the effects of the Mexican-American War on the populace of the new territory, the internment of people of Japanese descent during the Second World War, the treatment of LGBTQ people, the extent of Jim Crow laws, etc. All examples of how human beings were less than equal, a long history of regarding certain people's lives as those that matter and others who don't. And all have been declared fixed by various means. The Emancipation Proclamation, constitutional amendments, the Indian Citizenship Act of 1924, the Civil Rights, Women's, and Gay Rights movements. I'm not saying that all these were not all momentous in themselves, but that there's such a ways to go, still to go. And I think Black Lives Matter is one of those ways that can move us forward. Black Lives Matter is not a phrase, a sign, a slogan, it is a movement. Co-founder Alicia Garza says, Black Lives Matter was created as a response to state violence and anti-Black racism and a call to action for those who want to fight it and build a world where Black lives do, in fact, matter. It carries with it that critical acknowledgement of history and what has not been. It carries the assumption that we declare this now because it isn't. I could list the many names of Black lives that have been cut short, but I know you've heard them many times. Black Lives Matter recognizes that systemic racism is not something that just happened in the past, but is personal and still present. I'm still learning, and there is still so much to learn. I'm embarrassed I only learned the horrible history of the Black community that once thrived in Tulsa. I'm learning how to recognize my own biases. I'm learning how to join in solidarity with those whose lives have not mattered and still struggle to be seen and valued. Trans, Asian, LGBTQ, Indigenous, immigrants, and refugees. I'm learning that progress for one marginalized group of people promotes equality among all. Just this last year, I learned that my chosen faith, Unitarian Universalism, is making a fresh effort through widening the circle to acknowledge the racism that has existed and rededicate efforts towards change. We have been called to work towards making our principles realized in this world. I believe we can join this effort, this movement as a congregation by displaying a Black Lives Matter banner. We can let our neighborhood, the cars that drive by, the whole city of Tacoma know what we value and how we live our faith. We also are asking everyone to hold us to account. Every single one of us is creating the future by what we do now, today. By taking this action, we can create a fairer future, one that comes closer to our UU principles of the inherent worth and dignity of every person, equality, justice for all. We all say we want to make a difference in this world. We can.
Today's meditation is adapted from Breathing Through by wideawake.org. Close your eyes and focus on your breathing. Don't try to breathe any special way. Just notice your breath. Note that it happens all by itself, without your will, without your even deciding each time to inhale or exhale. While you pay attention to your breath, notice how it is less like you are breathing and more like you are being breathed. Breathed by life, the same way everyone in your house, in this congregation, and on this planet now is being breathed by life as well. We are all connected. Visualize your breath as a stream or ribbon of air. See it flow up through your nose, down through your windpipe and into your lungs. From your lungs, visualize the breath flow through your heart. Picture it flowing through your heart and then straight out from your chest to reconnect with the larger web of life. Let the breath stream as it passes through you and through your heart appear as one loop within that vast web, connecting you with it. Open your awareness to the suffering, cruelty, and injustice that we have borne witness to. Drop for now all your defenses and open to your knowledge of that suffering and the wrongness of racial exploitation. You're asked to do nothing for now, but let the heaviness of that pain pass through your heart as you breathe the heaviness in and through and out. Let the stream of breath move through and out again. Do not hold on to the pain. Surrender it to the vast healing resources of life. You are breathing these painful truths into yourselves and through your heart without holding on. Keep breathing.
If any of the words spoken today have had any kind of impact on you, I ask that for a brief moment, you close your eyes and imagine what life could be like for so many if we embraced what has moved us. If any of our words today have moved you to deepen your empathy, I hope it moves you to continue to develop your democratic impatience for injustice and resist neutrality. Thank you for being with us today. May it be so.
Our closing words are some that you can also participate in. All of us need all of us to make it, by Megan Foley and Teresa I. Soto. Unitarian Universalist minister Reverend Teresa Soto writes, all of us need all of us to make it. I want you to get used to those words. Make them your prayer. All of us need all of us to make it. This is why Unitarian Universalists support the Black Lives Matter movement. Please take a moment to center the struggle for Black lives in your thoughts. Say it with me, loud or soft. All of us need all of us to make it. In a world where some of us are targeted for struggle and brutality, where others of us benefit and flourish, we pray. All of us need all of us to make it. In a world where powerful people of ill will and indifference make us fearful for our safety and our futures, we pray. All of us need all of us to make it. In the excruciating space that lives between seeing and naming, and hearing and changing, we pray. All of us need all of us to make it. Make a picture in your mind of someone you aren't very happy with right now. Look at their face in your mind and pray. All of us need all of us to make it. Unitarian Universalists believe that all of us need all of us to make it. This is why we are in solidarity with the movement for Black lives today and every day. Amen.
Please join me in the unison reading as Bob extinguishes our chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Our closing blessing song comes from Zyriel.
From you I receive, to you I give, together we share, and by this we live. From you I receive, to you I give, together we share, and by this we live.